Hello and welcome to this video on setting up GTViewer Data Server for the first time on a new machine. I'm going to walk you through the steps for setting up IIS, the Internet Information Services, then GTViewer Data Server, and finally making sure that everything is running correctly and your GTViewer for iOS and Android clients can download data. I'll be using GTViewer Data Server version 6 and Windows Server 2022. But the process is similar for most versions, and I'll try to point out some of the key differences along the way. Let's get started by installing IIS, the Internet Information Services. If you already have this step, you can jump to the next part. Okay, go to your Server Manager under the Windows Start button and select the Add Roles and Features. I'm going to move this over a little bit so we can see it. You have to next through a couple of pages until you get the list of roles. And look through the list until you find Web Server IIS. If it's not checked, it's not installed. So let's check it. We'll have to confirm we want to add that feature and then go to the next page. At the top of the list of features, there's a .NET Framework 4.8 features list. Expand that. And it will have an ASP.NET 4.8. You need to check that as well. If you're using an older version of Windows Server, this may be a lower version, like 4.7 or 4.6. Go ahead and check whatever the highest version is, and you'll have to go back and make sure you have the .NET Framework Runtime version 4.8 installed. The version of ASP.NET can be a lower version than the .NET Framework for the runtime, and it will all work in the end, but you need to install whatever the latest ASP.NET is on the server you have. And if you're using a version of Windows Server that's older than 2022, I believe you have to install the .NET Framework 4.8 runtime. You get it by default with 2022. If you plan on using web services with GTViewer Data Server, you also need to go to the WCF Services item and expand it and select the HTTP activation, and you have to confirm that as well. You may not need to do this, but if you plan on using web services, which would be things like writing your own applications to communicate with GTViewer Data Services through web services, or if you use one of the tools that's provided with GTViewer Data Server, the GTVDS admin tool, then you will also need to have the web services running. So I would go ahead and check it and then go to the next page and the next until you get to the install button here. And it takes a few minutes to do the installation. I'm going to start it and then I'm going to let it skip through to the end, and then I'll pick back up when it's done. Okay, IIS has been installed. I'm going to close the Server Manager out. And let's just verify that it's there. You can find it under the Start button, but I'm just going to type in IIS under the search and run it. And I'm also going to pin it to my taskbar so I can get back to it easily in the future here. We'll take a quick look. If we expand some of these items, you'll see here's our server, GTVDS demo. There's application pools and sites. Okay, now that IIS has been installed, we can move on to installing the GTViewer Data Server. GTI delivers the GTViewer Data Server as a directory of files, and I've already copied those files to the desktop here. I'll look inside this directory, and you'll see there are a couple of directories and several files. The iNet pub directory is a sort of mirror image of what the IIS delivers or installs on your computer, and we're going to take the GTViewer ASP.NET app, or the GTViewer Data Server ASP.NET app, and copy that to our machine's IIS directory. There's also a tools directory. This is various tools that come with GTViewer Data Server. We'll go over some of these later. And there's also all the documentation. The main document is the GTViewer Data Server.doc. There's also a README. You can always tell what version you have here by going to the README and looking at the last entry. This one is version 6001. So let's go back to our inet pub directory, go into the www root, and there's a GTViewer directory. We can quickly look inside there. This is just the ASP.NET app that is GTViewer data server. So I'm going to copy this directory and then go to our C drive and go to the inet pub directory that IIS installed or created, and then go to its www root. And I'm going to paste our GTViewer directory here. Now, once that's done, we can go to IIS and do some more setup. I'm going to start IIS again and maximize it and open up our tabs here, our items, and you'll see that under default website, we have a GTViewer folder now, but it's not an application yet, or an ASP.NET application. We're going to make it into one here shortly. But first we need to create an application pool just for GTViewer data server. You could use one of the defaults that are provided, but if you do that, we have to grant some permissions to the application pool user, and you may not want those permissions for all of your other ASP.NETs that are using some of these default application pools. So I'm going to add an application pool. I'm going to name it GTV Data App Pool. You can name it anything you want. Just make sure to remember it because we will be using that name later on. You'll see it shows up here. We can now go to our sites directory folder here and select GTViewer, and we're going to right click on it and select Convert to Application. This will convert our directory into an ASP.NET application. It defaults to the default app pool. We create our own, so I'm going to press the Select button and use the drop down and select GTV Data App Pool. The rest of these items are okay, and you'll notice it changes the icon for your folder, so it looks a little different. It's got a little globe and a page. The next thing to do is we need to configure some of the items to make everything work correctly. If we go to our, I'm going to close out of IIS and go back to our folder on our C drive, inet pub, www root, GTViewer. There's several directories in here, and the application pool user needs to have write access to some of these. It must have it to the log file directory, and depending on what you're using GTViewer for iOS and Android for, if you're using data collection or you're sharing red lines, then you'll have to also add write permission for your application pool user to these web app directories. I'm just going to do it for the log file directory. It's the same process for all four, and if you need to do that, this would be the time to do it, or if you need to add those permissions, this is when you would do it. So I'm going to right click on the log files directory, select properties, go to the security tab, and we need to add a new grouper user here. So I'm going to press the edit button and press add. Now, an application pool user is a little different, and there's a special way to indicate it. You go to where you enter the object name and you say IS space app pool / and the name of your application pool, and in our case it's GTV Data App Pool. Now there's many ways to mess this up. You cannot put the space, you cannot put enough P's, there's 3 P's, you can put a / and not a /, and you can also miss the P's here again. I know all that because I've done it so many times incorrectly, but there is a way to verify what you've got. There's a check names button. When you press it, if it converts it to this underlined name of your app pool, then it worked. If it doesn't, you need to figure out what was wrong and how you typed it and correct it. So I'm going to say okay. You'll see our GTV Data App Pool appears in our list of groups and usernames here. So select it, and we're going to add modify and write permissions, but that's the same as just saying full control and saying OK. Now again, if you're going to be using data collection or sharing redlines, you would need to do the rest of these directories as well. If you're not going to upload files or images in your data collection apps, you might not need it for the files in the images directory, but you would still need it for the web app data directory. So that's depending on your specific use. The next part is to do some configuration in the web config file. This is the main configuration file for GTV or data server. So I'm going to open it up. I'm just going to use Notepad. And this file's got several things in it, and you can change anything you need to do for your environment. You usually don't need to change anything except in this section here called App Settings. And all of these settings will default to usable values except for the registration. And that has to have a registration key that you're provided by GTI, and it has the number of licenses you've purchased and various other information. There are some other things. If you only want to use HTTPS, you can change this to 1. You can move your project directories outside the virtual directory. That's what data path is. You can move your usage file to another path. That's what usage path is, but they'll all default to working values except the registration. So I'm going to get a registration key and paste it in here. And it's just a string of seemingly random characters. Let me get it up here a little higher, and it does have to be precisely pasted in there with no extra spaces or anything, and sometimes there's spaces before and after it, so it's very critical that you get it correct. We usually send out the entire line, the whole app key registration value equal all lines, so you can just paste in the whole line, and it makes it simpler and less chance of error. So at this point we can save our file and exit out of it, and GTV or data server is set up, but we don't have any data configured. And the next part we'll set up some demo data that's delivered with the GTV or data server and make sure everything's working as we expect. So the GTV or data server delivery files include a sample data set. It's the GTI demo data, and it's called electgas. There's a directory here. If we look inside of it, it's a packaged up set of files that was created by GTmanifest, and it's already there. There's a couple of other files. You need to have a master manifest. So there is a manifest.ini.sample that's delivered. I'm going to copy this file and rename it to just master or manifest.ini. If we look inside this file, it basically defines what projects we have that we want GTV or data server to provide, and it's electgas, which is the name of the directory, the group it's in, which is demo, a name that you can give it, GTI demo, and the GTM file in that electgas directory. There is a date here at the end. This isn't used anymore, but it has to be, something has to be in this field because there can be more fields later on here. So I'm going to exit out of that. We've got a master manifest file now. The next thing is to make sure you have some users defined. If you go to the bin directory, there's a users.ini.sample. I'm going to copy this and rename it to users.ini. And we can look inside this one as well. There's 3 default users. You can make these anything you want. This is just a sample, so you don't have to type all this in for your initial testing. There's a demo, a test, and an admin. It's always user, password, group, so these are all pretty simple. The only one that's different here is admin, and admin has a more sophisticated password. And the more important thing here is that it is in the admin group, which is a special group, and certain tools have to be in a user that is in the admin group. So you must have one, and you only have to have one, but you must have one, and we'll use that later when we do the GTV DS reset, And there's other tools that also require an admin user to do certain operations. So I'm going to close this out, and we are now ready to try it out. There's a couple of ways to do this. The easiest is just to open up a web browser and go to the default page in our GTViewer directory. So I'm going to type in http:// our machine name here is GTV DS-Demo. We're going to the GTViewer directory, and it's default.html. And once you go to that, you'll see an image in the middle of the screen. And while the server's spinning up, that's all you're going to see. And eventually, you'll get this block of version numbers here in the upper left. If you never get this block of version numbers, something is wrong, and we have to go figure out what that is. And where would you go to figure out what's wrong? I would go to the log file directory. If we go to our c:/inetpub www GTViewer, there's a log files directory, and now you'll see there's several files here. Originally it just had a readme.txt file, and here's your log file. It tells various information, your version, several modes and settings. It tells what projects you have available, only our electric gas that we set up. It also has some information about things that I didn't do, like set the right permission on the web app data. It's got a couple of messages for that, but there's no errors, so it looks like everything is correct. If you were going to do data collection, you need to go add those right permissions to the web app directories, but that's a separate topic. There's also a usage file. This tells the number of users that or tracks the number of users that are using GTViewer Data Server. There's a utility to read this file. Most of it's encrypted. There's also an audit file which tells every time a user's license is used or returned, it keeps track of that. The next thing we should do is try to do a reset. If we go to our delivered files, in the tools directory, there is a tool called GTV-DS Reset. Now, in older versions of GTViewer Data Server, and this would be versions before 5, there was a ASPX web page that you went to reset the server. It was resetserver.aspx in the admin directory. This has changed, and we no longer have that web page, but we have an application that does the same thing. It actually does a little more. I'm going to run it. I'm going to close off some of this stuff so we can see it. And it just asks for a few things. It wants a server URL. You can just give it the name of the server, which ours is GTV-DS-Demo in this case, but you have to give it an admin user. You can't give it a regular user or they won't be able to do the reset. So I'm going to say admin is our username, and our password was admin123*. There's a little show button if you want to make sure. You have the option of saving this password or not. I'm going to go ahead and save it. If you're concerned about security and someone using this app that shouldn't, then I wouldn't check the save password button. Reset server, all it does is cause the server to reload the configuration files. It's not destructive in any way. We're not leaving it as a web page anymore because somebody could write a script that called it repeatedly and it could disrupt your users. So it's been moved into this application that has to have an admin login. But it does, if you change your data, if you add projects or change anything with the data collection apps, or add a project, remove a project, update a project, I would do a reset server just to make sure everything's reloaded and everything's correct or everything's freshly in memory. So I'm going to press the reset button. It just takes a second to do it. It gives you kind of a summary of what the log file does. It gives you some versions. It gives you what the login level is, how many users are in use, or licenses are in use. It tells you what projects you have that are available, and some other path information and your users. You can copy this and put it somewhere else if you want as well. There's also the another tab here for log files. You have to give it a directory to save the log files to, and then you can get the log file, usage file, or usage audit file and download them to your machine. Now, in our case here, we're on the server, so we just have to go to the, to the inetpub www.root gtviewer log files directory, and we can get it. But if we weren't on the server, and you want to get these files, then you can use the reset app to download them. You just have to give it a path to download them to. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you do a reset over here, it resets the log file. So if you reset it and then do get your log file, you're going to get pretty much an empty log file. But if you do get your log file first, it will do the reset and download the last log file. So if you really want the information, that's the way to do it. Now, everything looked good on our reset, and I believe everything is ready to go, and we can verify that your users can download data. Now, how do you do that? Well, you could use a device running GTViewer for iOS or Android and connect to this server and download the data. But if you're like me, sitting at a server and you don't have the device handy, you can go to your tools directory. There is a GTViewer data client directory, and if we run this, this is just an app, a Windows app, that will download a data set from the GTViewer data server. It's the same thing, it does the same thing as GTViewer for iOS or Android, except it doesn't download it into that sandbox on the device. It downloads it to a directory we specify on our server. I'm going to create one here, and on my C drive, I'm just going to make a new directory and call it data, and select it. You could type it in as well. We have to give it a server name. I'm going to say our server here, gtvds-demo. You can say http:// and you can also put the /GTViewer directory at the end, but it's smart enough to figure out that if you haven't specified all that, it's going to add it for you automatically. Now, I don't have to be an admin user to download data. I just have to be a user that is in a group that data is in the group of, or in the same group. So I'm going to use the demo user. The password was demo. I'm going to say to save that and press the connect button. And in our list here, we get a red line that says we have one data set available to us, GTI demo. That's our one data set. And it's red because it's on the server, but it's not local. So if I select it, I can press refresh all, and it will download the data set to this GTViewer data directory I've specified at the top. It just takes a few seconds to do it, and now it's green, means it's downloaded and current, matching what's on the server. If we go to our C drive and to the data directory, you'll see we have an electric gas directory, and in it is an expanded GTViewer data set. And if you had GTViewer for Windows on this machine, you could just pick find the GTM file, like gas, double click on it, and open up GTViewer. Now, we've shown here that everything is working as I expect. We can download data to a client, even though it's on the server here. It still had to download the data. So the only thing left for you to do now is add your own data. So how would you go about that? Let's go back to our C drive, to our inetpub www.root GTViewer directory, and you would have to prepare your data with GTmanifest and package it up so that it's in a directory, a package directory, and then add that directory to this folder, the GTViewer folder. Now that will get your data in the directory, but you still have to update your manifest, master manifest INI file, and you would just add your entry for the data you've added. You can add however many data sets you want, and they can be in any group you want, and you can put the alternate name here if you want and specify their GTM file. Now you can do this manually, or you can use the GTmanifest tool and it can create a master manifest for you. Let's just quickly go to our tools directory here and show how you would do that. although I may make a separate video on using GTmanifest just to make it clear on all the steps you need to do. But it is under Tools, GTmanifest. There's a couple of different versions. There's a GUI version and a command line version. I'm going to run the GUI one. You basically give it a project name, the group, a source directory for the GTViewer data files, previous directory, so you'll know if there's any, you can determine if there's differences, and a deployment directory, and then you load it and create it. There's also a tab for master manifest. You give it your data directory. I can give it the I'll give it the one on the server here, inetpub, www.root, GTViewer, and say load, and you'll see it goes out and finds all the projects in that directory, and you can select the ones you want and create another master manifest file. That's the automated way to do it, but it's pretty simple and you could do it manually as well. So that's everything you need to get GTViewer data server up and running and how to test it. I didn't have any problems because I've done this so many times and I know what to do, but there are problems, and I'll create another video and show how to, troubleshoot some of those problems and get things working if you do have them. But the thing to keep in mind is always go to your log file, because the log file will tell you what's wrong. That is GTViewer data server's only interface that it has to tell you things. So if there's any information it can tell you, it's going to be in this log file directory. If you go to this directory and there's no log files, you probably didn't add right permission to the application pool user, or you didn't get the right user. So I would check that first and try everything again. If you need to reset IIS if you made some major changes, like change your permissions or change major things more than just modifying the projects, I would do an IIS reset from a command prompt. Like IIS reset. This will restart IIS. You could also go into the IIS app and stop and start the server. You can also go to the web config file and modify it and save it, and that will reload your ASP.NET app, which is GTViewer data server. That concludes this video on installing GTViewer data server version 6. If you have any problems, make sure to check the log file first. If you still have problems, you may want to visit our website, gti-us.com or gtviewerblog.com. Good luck and thanks for watching.